Hello and welcome to Regenerative Rising's podcast, Elevating Stories, Activating Change. I am your host, Nisha Mary Poulose, Executive Director of Regenerative Rising, and with me today is Katlin Smith, founder and CEO of Simple Mills. Set up in 2012 with the vision of making it easier for people to access healthy food, Simple Mills use paleo and gluten-free ingredients to create nutrient-rich food that is simple to prepare and simple to find. Katlin founded the company as a response to her own struggle to find wholesome food in the market. Today, their products are available in stores across the US and has become a much-loved brand that stands for the health of people and of the planet. Thank you for joining us today, Katlin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited because Simple Mills is all about healthy, wholesome, and yummy food. And it's a story of a young woman who blazed the trail. Your story is very inspiring. And why don't you tell us a little bit more about what the company is and where you're at?
Certainly. So I started Simple Mills about 10 years ago after cleaning up my diet and taking out a lot of the processed food and a lot of the sugar. And what I discovered when I cleaned up my diet was just how much food affects in our bodies and our health. When I started the company, funny enough, like sugar was the number one ingredient in a lot of baking mixes, for example. And I just realized so many of the decisions we've made as a food system are less than ideal for people's health. They're really kind of profit-centered decisions versus health or what's best for people decisions. And I started thinking about how I could help change what people are eating, and ultimately landed on the idea of starting a food company that does it differently, that makes these kind of really delicious and also approachable and convenient snacks out of things that we want to be eating more of instead of things that we want to be eating less of. So commonly we use ingredients like almond flour and coconut sugar, sunflower seeds, flax seeds, chia seeds, to create familiar treats. So things like a cheddar cracker or a chocolate chip cookie, so that it's easy to eat real food. And I think the other kind of cornerstone of our brand is really never using anything artificial. So we like to say only purposeful ingredients, nothing artificial ever. And this is something that's really unique for us. There's a lot that goes behind our sourcing, which is something that we've paid attention to from day one of the business, of thinking about, one, how do we diversify what people are eating in their diets? But really also, how do we get looking at the ingredients themselves and how they're created, and making sure that those are done with people's health in mind. So I'll give you an example. So we have a pumpkin muffin mix, and pumpkin powder. I was sourcing pumpkin powder at one point, and found that what you would label as pumpkin on an ingredient deck was actually about 20% maltodextrin, which is actually corn. So that's a processing aid, which is something that we're not okay with as a brand. We're not okay with kind of these hidden agents in food, but it's something that's very common in the food industry. And so it's led to us working very closely with our suppliers to develop ingredients even. So in that case, we worked with the supplier to develop a pumpkin powder that didn't have maltodextrin in it. But most recently, it's been something that has enabled us to enter into this world of regenerative agriculture, which kind of leads me to the second part of our mission. And I'd say it was probably 2019, 2020 when I started getting really excited about the impact that our agriculture system has on our planet's wellness. And I realized just how hand in hand people and planetary wellness is. And this led me to, and we can talk more about this, but this led me to doing even like permaculture design courses, reading books, and talking to growers, and thinking about how do we at Simple Mills leave a positive mark on our planet. And I think that I feel a large sense of responsibility as a founder and CEO in the natural food space, in the food space, to leave a positive mark. You think about most industries, they can only do more harm or do less harm. So like, that's where you get the term sustainability, right? It's you're trying to do a little bit less harm. But the food industry, we have a powerful opportunity to actually leave a really positive impact on our planet. And so we at Simple Mills have been beginning to dig into this space since 2020. And it's been just a really exciting thing for us to be working on.
Wow, that's really beautiful. I have like so many questions, but that's can't agree with you more. The food industry, the agriculture industry, and it's really sad that we're even calling it an industry, because it's something that's coming out of the earth, and today it's contributing more to the planetary crisis than fossil fuel burning even. It's lovely to hear that. I have so many questions, but I think we can unpack it as we go along. But like I'm really, it's been about a decade coming up next year, I believe. And how does it feel to look back and see where your journey has brought you, and how does it feel?
You know, to be honest, it feels a little bit surreal. In a lot of ways, it feels like nothing has changed because I'm still the same person. But I also look around and I know so much has changed in our industry, what's on our shelves, Simple Mills is obviously at a very different place. Where today the largest natural baking mix, largest natural cracker, and largest natural cookie brand. And so it's like a humbling fact that you can't really ever reconcile with. Like you never actually believe it. But I think in terms of how I feel looking forward too is I feel invigorated and excited about the future of what we can continue to influence and create. One of some of my proudest moments in our history have been watching the industry change. And so I referenced in the beginning how the baking mix shelves, when I first started, had sugar as the number one ingredient in many of the products. That's something that would never happen today. And I think that's really neat. Like the first time that we were listed in Mintel as something to watch, I thought this is wonderful, because you know who's reading this is Betty Crocker. Yeah. And while they're probably not going to make a product that's different, a product that's just like ours, they'll probably think about, okay, in our next launch, should we consider using less sugar, because we're seeing the success that's related to this kind of changing consumer interest. And as a result, I feel kind of a similar, I think, excitement about the space in terms of thinking about how our food impacts our planet and how consumers are beginning to value that piece more and more, and the pressure that puts on players in the food industry and the changes that will come as a result.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. Actually, that's absolutely true that in the last decade, the idea of health and idea of what we put into our bodies being directly linked to health has changed so much. And this value for natural products, I mean, 15, 20 years ago, people would call it hocus if you thought of eating natural local food. So that in that sense, I think Simple Mills certainly was one of the pioneers in really bringing this to the mainstream, I would say.
Well, thank you. We hope that is our hope and goal.
That is awesome. Yeah, but as you started when you were really young, and I'm wondering, what was it like to be a woman founder sitting at the helm of a business which was kind of challenging the norm of what health is or what food and snacks should be? What was that like?
It's funny because I could go so many different directions with this. I think on one hand, I was just so myopically focused on making the business successful that I didn't have much of a time to bat an eyelash or think about the the environment around me quite as much. And so it was. Looking back, I can see it was really difficult to raise money. I mean, my first fundraising round, oh my goodness, to give you just a little bit of a story there, I was at the time attending University of Chicago's Booth School of Business. And I was taking a course on the New Venture Challenge, which is a competition to get investment in your business. Funny enough, I had applied to business school around the same time that I started the business, and they were kind of like these two independent, unrelated aspects of my life. But by the time I got to business school, I was prioritizing classes that let me work on the business, and was pretty much exclusively focused on the business's success. And so I ended up taking this course really because I wanted a course that would let me spend as much time as possible on the business. But it ironically was centered around fundraising. And so I was introduced to all of these potential investors at just the perfect time. It was really a wonderful coincidence that I was in the right place in the right time. But even despite the fact that you have like a premier business school, that you have wonderful access to potential investors, it was really difficult. I would talk to probably 9 different investors every day, and every one of them would say, this isn't right for me, but I have someone who it might, or like there's 2 people in my network who it might be right for, and they would introduce me to those 2 people, and so I would talk to them, of course. And it got to the point that the way that we ended up getting our lead investor for our first round was he went to a grocery store in Charlotte, North Carolina before talking to me. And standing next to him in the grocery aisle, he asked the woman next to him what she thought of the brand. And she independently had been speaking to me about investing in the business. And so he said, "What do you think of this business?" And she said, "Well, I'm thinking about investing in it." Which of course created a lot of, I think, excitement on his end. But I think it's just that I think part of what's, of course, we've all seen the statistics about how difficult it is for women to receive funding, and or how few women receive funding for their businesses relative to men. And I think part of it is that women solve different problems than men do. So the problems that a woman might solve may not resonate with male investors. So you take a natural food company as an example. Women do most of the grocery shopping. And so their ability for that to resonate with them is just not quite as high as, say, something in maybe, I don't know, financial services. So I think that's one piece is looking at different problems in different ways. And another piece is really the likelihood of imposter syndrome. And so you see this a lot more. I see it on our team even, of a lot more imposter syndrome among women, where when they say they have to be kind of 180% sure before they're going to tell you, yes, that's true. And I think that's something that I've had to wrestle with too, is how to note the imposter syndrome when it comes up and not overly react to it, and expressing confidence when I do have confidence, right?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I I was growing up and I didn't believe in the glass ceiling. I just thought, oh, I can do anything. And then as I grew in my career, I believe I kept hitting it. But I just blamed myself or at a lot of times thinking, oh, okay, maybe it's not good enough. And so at that point of awareness that, oh, it's not just me, and it's not, most of the time it's not at all me, but it's a system. It's a lot of issues, a lot of lack of alignment in basic roles that have been played for generations now. And so I just feel it's like so important for young women to know that there are women who made it, and these are the kind of challenges, and this is how you get past it. This is how you rethink it. And I'm wondering, did you have like a community or mentors who supported you through it, and like a hand to hold while, also as a single founder, which is otherwise you have a partner to like at least vent with. So what was your support system like?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest pieces of support that I had it came from my coach. So in the very early days of the business, I met the woman who is still my professional coach today. So she was introduced to me by one of our earliest investors. She was his former business partner, and he thought perhaps she might want to roll with us. And when I met her, I was struck by just how smart she was with, and what I'll call the people stuff. At least that's what I called it in my head back then. Because I think I'd come into running a business with this belief that leaders are born, not made. And I think a lot of I reflect back on high school, for example, and who you saw as the person who was going to win the student council. And there was like this vision you had in your head of what a leader looked like, right? Yeah. And those people, it felt like they achieved it very naturally. And thus, when you go to run a business, you think, oh, I'm either a good leader or a bad leader, and that's just the way that I am. Mm-hmm. So it's a very fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And I think one of the things that she really helped me realize was the degree to which the best leaders are people who work really hard at it. And this is something that I have watched in our business. I've watched in the leaders on our team. The people who are the strongest leaders in our organization, it's not by accident. It's not because they were born as good leaders. It's because they work really hard towards it. And I think that leaning into getting a coach so early on helps me along that journey. There's so many learnings that I've had over the years for the leadership style that's needed from me as a leader for that stage of business, and being able to bring that forward based on her coaching. And so I think she's been a real, I think, guide and mentor through the process, but also a friend, someone who, when things don't go well, it's also a shoulder to lean on as well.
Yeah, it's this difference between the performance mindset and a learning mindset. Where the performance mindset is just, you're supposed to just be prepared to do anything, and you're supposed to be born and like secretly train, or I don't know. So when you start looking at it like everything is a learning and everything is a learning curve, it just allows you to be more free, be yourself, and have so much more encouragement from the self. So that's I just wanted to I really feel that it's women supporting other women in this is so important, just from a point of view of having that hope of saying, oh, okay, somebody made it, and it's just about changing how you look at the world and how you sort of approach it. Yeah. So, okay. So let's just talk about what it really means to be healthy for a bit. You did mention that it was born out of a mission to bring healthier food for yourself, and then you've managed to kind of mainstream it. And your products are gluten-free and it's paleo-friendly. From your own experience, you did mention it a little, but could you elaborate a bit more on what it really means for the body when you switch to natural grain-free diets and in your experience and perspective?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the things that we really believe at our core is that food has such a power to transform the way that you feel, what you're able to do on a daily basis. We all are familiar with like that 2 p.m. afternoon slump and the impacts that it can have when you eat a lunch that's not ideal, for example. And I think one of our core tenets as a brand too has been not I think preaching or endorsing specific diets and saying, okay, this is the one diet that everyone should follow, or this diet works for everyone. I mean, I can personally attest to the fact that finding the right diet for your own personal needs can really be an incredible change. And so that's part of the reason why we're not necessarily prescriptive in saying, okay, this is exactly the diet you should follow. We want people to listen to their bodies and focus on individuality, which also can change for an individual at different times throughout their lifetime, depending on their microbiome, depending on their stage of life. Each person's individual makeup is unique, and what works for one person may not work for another. And so as a result, you'll kind of notice on our box, while our products are kind of gluten-free and grain-free, we focus not so much on what our products don't have or are free from, but rather what our products do have. So real nutrient-dense ingredients that offer protein, that offer healthy fats, fiber, because we kind of see these things as timeless principles of no matter who you are, no matter your situation, these are things that are going to work hard for you. And I think too, it's a more optimistic message as well. I know there's so many negative messages in the world or on packages, and it's something where we don't want people to feel afraid of their food and feel, well, I can't have that, or that's off limits. And so it also encourages a very healthy relationship with food, which is thinking about what food can do for you versus why you should be afraid of certain things in your food, right?
Yeah, I saw that. Like with your packaging, it's very simple what you talk about as ingredients. There are 6 or 7 ingredients, and that's it. And that idea of this is it and nothing else. And then you look at that, oh, okay, so do I feel like eating pumpkin powder? And how does that make me feel? Is a very intuitive sort of a response. And did your own intuition play into this? Because I did read that you still work on a lot of the recipes. So how do you bring this intuition into your process?
It's an interesting question. I think that in terms of how we bring intuition into the innovation process, it's a funny thing because you can prove something out perfectly with data and still believe that it's not quite going to be the right thing. I think one of the places where we feel this particularly, which is, I think, particularly relevant for your podcast, is on the topic of regenerative agriculture. So one thing that we really believe is that the foods that are grown in using regenerative principles in a regenerative system are a lot more likely to have a higher nutrient density. And this is something that is just starting to be proved out. And it's part of the reason why we're digging in this space and believe that people and planetary health go hand in hand. But it's like, can we perfectly prove that at this time? No, we can't. And so it's kind of leaning into these spot areas. I mean, even starting the business originally, that was an intuitive move. It was, I don't have the exact data to say that people are going to make these decisions, and they're going to begin questioning what they're eating and thinking more critically about the impacts that sugar and all of these processed ingredients have on their health. But once I felt it personally, I said, wow, that has a very real impact. Other people are going to recognize this. So I do think it's a very important part of the innovation process.
Yeah, speaking of like this, so much of the science, there's every other day something is proven, something is disproven. There's a new superfood, or there's a new trend that is coming out. So I imagine that's also kind of a challenge for you, because you're really focusing on this food from what from the core of it, that it is natural, it's healthy, and it makes you feel good. But then when you're in the market, how do you manage or balance it out? How do you balance out these changing trends with all of this scientific data, which is really kind of flooding the market and often confusing the consumer, the ordinary person?
Yeah, and I think these diet fads are a real challenge more broadly for people achieving kind of great outcomes, because we as a brand don't believe in jumping onto the latest trend. We do want people to experiment with different diets and experiment with their own personal health journeys, so that they're figuring out what works for them personally. But I don't think that really takes them back to adopting the latest quote unquote it diet. And the funny thing is, I've had, people in the space who have encouraged me to say like, oh, you should put this on the front of your package because it's really in tune with the given trend of the moment. And our response as a brand has been, yeah, we recognize that item fits the criteria for that diet. But we're not going to put it front of pack, knowing full and well that putting it front of pack would increase sales. Because we don't want people to get too attached to these diets that come and go and may encourage people to do, like, some parts of it are probably rooted in good kind of resilient nutrition science, and have that staying power, but then parts of it are not. And that's kind of where we go back to these evergreen wellness principles and habits. So like things that we believe, focusing on whole foods. So things that you can pronounce, things that your body knows what they are, eating fewer artificial ingredients, less things that are made in a lab, more things that are grown in nature. Eating things that have real nutrition for your body. So vitamins, minerals, micronutrients, and all of those things are really going to build to a healthier being. And so it's funny because my dad, he runs an architecture firm, and his position has been these architecture trends even come and go. And his focus has been on evergreen design principles and what kind of into eternity looks really good on a house. Like, for example, you think about Parisian architecture. I don't think any of us has ever looked at that and been like, wow, that's not just beautiful. And yet it's so old. It's not kind of going by these year by year trends and fads. And so I think about it in very much the same way.
Oh, that's great. I'm also an architect, by the way.
No way.
And I too believe that. So when you do something, it's really about what you feel in the space, and that's always timeless, and that's excellent. That's the kind of foundation on which this brand is built, and it's this beautiful combination of intuition and science and the actual results that you obtain. That's super as a brand and as a product. And on that note, I just want to say that you are tuned in to Regenerative Rising's podcast, Elevating Stories, Activating Change. I am your host, Nisha Mary Poulose, Executive Director of Regenerative Rising. And today we are speaking with Katlin Smith, founder and CEO of Simple Mills, a food brand that has bridged the gap between taste and health by focusing on what is natural. So, Katlin, at the end of the day, all of this kind of circles back to how our food is produced, and you've been, it's something you've already brought up, and how there's a lot of focus now with your brand and your way of working on regenerative agriculture, because at the end of the day, how our food is produced is linked to our planet. And that is kind of something I really find very meaningful about the paleo diet, because it just goes back to human beings as a species and like, how did we originally eat before there were machines and the technology to like figure out our food. And that's kind of really simplifying it in a very wholesome way. And but on the other hand, there's so much organic washing out there, and there's so much bureaucracy and terminology, which is so nuanced and it confuses the buyer. And so in that regard, like even for you as a brand, how do you go about sourcing your ingredients to ensure that, you know, the almond flour or the vanilla or the cacao that you use is truly healthy and stays healthy through its movement through the supply web?
Yeah, and I think this is a place where companies probably don't have enough. It's tough for companies to be in touch with this, and we're fortunate in that since our early days, it's been a place where we paid quite a bit of attention, primarily due to the impacts on people's health. Because we feel so strongly about kind of the principles of kind of what's hidden in our food, and making sure that we have very tight standards about what goes into our products. Another aspect of that's kind of driven that for us is that our products are very difficult to make, in that it's not as simple as making a wheat containing product or the next product on the shelf. You know, for example, we don't use gums and emulsifiers. Using gums makes processing a whole lot easier. And without them, you have to have even tighter ingredient guardrails, or else your manufacturing is going to fluctuate a lot more. You're going to have a lot more quality problems. All that to say, sourcing has been a core competency that we've developed since the early days of our business, of diving into the supply chain. So if you think about most products on the shelf that you see, even ones produced by large food companies, are contract manufactured, meaning the brand hires out the manufacturing of the product. And oftentimes they leave the sourcing of the ingredients up to the contract manufacturer. So they have a contracted rate that they pay the contract manufacturer for the product. However, for us, we've said from the early days, we want to be the ones who are doing the sourcing, which is something that's more expensive for us. It results in a much larger operations team, but it also really helps us have tight control over the process. And this is something that, as we've delved into the regenerative agriculture world, also enables us to work directly with farmers and growers in the process. So, like, I'll give you an example. One of our projects that we just announced this year is a multi-year farmer-led partnership to make almond farming more sustainable. So we are working with several other brands, so Capello's, Daily Harvest, to create what we're calling the Almond Project. And it is working with Treehouse Almonds and White Buffalo Land Trust to bring regenerative soil principles and regenerative regenerative principles into their farming process and experimenting with the impacts of those principles and actually measuring it so that we can share it with other farmers in California Central Valley. And this project really was created because we already had a tight relationship with Treehouse Almonds, which is, one of our suppliers and has been for a very long time. And so when we came to them with, okay, we would like to experiment with these principles, they said, oh, that's really interesting. Let's give that a try. So it's all to say that having those relationships down to the farmer level really enable us as a brand to take a more holistic look at our supply chain and have much more influence and control over that process. But I hesitate to use the words influence and control because I think it's a partnership, right? Like we're working with them to figure out what makes sense.
Yeah, I did read that, and I thought that was, I actually meant to ask you more about the almond project because, by the way, the fact that you've put these partnerships and these suggestions and ways to contribute on your website is really great. It also gives the buyer, the casual viewer, an idea of how can you as an individual contribute? How can you as a brand contribute? And if you don't want to contribute in that way, how are you contributing by just buying or consuming a Simple Mills product? So what about things like the other part of regenerative agriculture is, of course, buying things local or sourcing things local. And I think the Almond Project beautifully fits into that because it's one of those things that are grown in the region. And so what does that look like for you as in a very practical sense? Like, how do you engage with the farmer? Do you play a direct role in that? Do you have a team that does that?
Yeah, so in terms of how we work with the farmers, we do have team members who work directly with the farmers. I also go out to the farms, and it's honestly the highlight of my entire year when I'm there. My favorite actually is one of the farmers that we're working with. Well, I guess I can't name favorites, but one of the ones that I'm very excited about is a farmer that we're working with out in Minnesota on sunflower. So, as we are, I think this has become much more evident in the news lately, but sunflower is primarily sourced from Ukraine and Russia. And funny enough, we put in place this partnership. I want to say it was 2020 where we started working with several Minnesota farmers on bringing these principles to life on their land in Minnesota. So we took, they were previously growing corn on the land, and we kind of contracted them, provided them with direct contracts, financial incentives to support the adoption of these principles. So they're using cover crops, they're doing low to no till, they're putting animals on the land, and it's been a stunning success. It's been really neat to see. So, like when I went out there and saw Luke last summer, he actually dug out a section of his field 6 feet down, just a small section, so that we could see a cross section of the soil. And so we could see how far down the topsoil we went. We could see how far down we were getting worm casings, how far down the roots were going. And the sunflowers were rooting 6 feet plus down. There were worm casings 6 feet plus down. And what was neat too is last summer, I think they received one bout of rain in that growing season, and the sunflowers did great. Like they did a great job of making use for that. And that's part of probably why you're seeing the roots go so deep as they were. And so all to say, like we partner across our team with these growers. There are other instances where it doesn't make sense, but where we do believe that it kind of better is possible. So another place where we're working right now is on coconut sugar. So coconut sugar is a great crop for consideration in a regenerative system. It grows very well in agroforestry environments. And so we've been working through Pure Projet on kind of these coconut sugar agroforestry projects in Java, Indonesia. So that we're able to kind of also apply regenerative principles to our coconut sugar. But of course, to your point, that's not local. And I think that one thing that I have to caution our team on is this idea of striving for absolute perfection, where I think this whole thing is a journey, right? Like we can't get ourselves wrapped up in, okay, if it's not checking every single box perfectly, then we shouldn't do it at all. Because that's the danger, right? Is that it just gets too overwhelming.
Yeah.
I went and saw, this is something that just really stands out to me. I went and saw former President Obama speak shortly after his term. And someone asked him a rather timely question of, how do you feel like you got enough done? And he said, I have to, and I'm going to butcher his words. I won't do them justice, but he basically said something to the effect of, I have to get my team to realize that better is better. That it's, groups of people move a boulder up a hill, and it rests there for a second. And then another group of people moves the boulder even further. And that's how you end up with, the women's right to vote or a civil rights, is something successful in the civil rights movement. These things are all incremental. And I think that regenerative agriculture is very much the same way, which is that, we have to move things along the spectrum and not get caught up in, we didn't address every single ingredient in our product, because that we can't do that on day one. But that better is better.
Yeah, so that's absolutely true. And also, I mean, from the practicality of it, because the idea is to change the system as much as you can. And then if you do it too drastically, then there's no adoption. You cannot be in the baked goods market and tell people not to eat brownies. It just doesn't take if you do that. So that's really I very beautifully put. But I'm wondering, do you were mentioning that with the farms in the US that you've actually engaged, have you had the opportunity to go to one of these farms with the coconut sugar or the cacao and see those things as well?
I haven't had a chance to do the coconut sugar ones yet. I mean, this project's still, about a year old, and I'm also pregnant and can't travel to Indonesia. But I very much look forward to it. I'm like I said, it's the highlight of my year when I get to go.
Oh, wonderful. And on that note, we're coming to sort of the last part of our time together, and I wanted to ask us, a little bit more on the personal journey side. As a woman, and in this system that we're in, where even the health that we're talking about, a lot of the data, a lot of the food is not very much attuned to women. So for example, my grandmother tells me, oh, okay, so if you're not feeling good today, it's probably that time of, you should not drink something, or if you're on your period, you should eat something else, and about body heat. And so I'm just wondering, what is that like for you? So in this journey, when you discovered what works for you, and as you were mentioning, you're pregnant, how do you find that it affects your body?
For me personally, I think it comes back to a lot of the same wellness principles that we've adopted as a brand have been ones that I strongly resonate with me personally, which is that when I eat real food, I feel better. When I eat kind of highly processed food, my goodness, it makes an impact. When I eat things that have a lot of nutrition, the kind of nutrient density, it plays a large role. Like right now, I'm having a smoothie that I made at home, just like raspberries, blueberries, peas, spinach, cashew milk, kefir. And it's delicious. And also I know that I'm going to do well a couple hours from now. So I think experimenting and figuring out what works best for each person individually is such a strong place to start.
And how do you focus on your own well-being amidst all of this this madness that is running your business and expanding and growing so fast? How do you take care of yourself?
I think I'm a lot better at it today than I was 10 years ago. When I started the business, it was all work. It was nonstop. I would get to work before the sun rose, and I would leave work after the sun went down. So I would hardly see the sun. But I think for today, it's first of all, making sure that I'm eating a great diet, that I'm eating well, that I'm cooking for myself. I think second of all, thinking about the impacts of stress and balancing that out as well. So much of our environment can be stressful, but I think mindfulness and a good meditation practice go a really long way. I personally, and figuring out a place to fit in that practice too. So for me personally, my drive to the office in the mornings has become one of those times where I take the time to notice the birds that are flying around me and looking out at the view and noticing the colors of leaves. And then when I get to work, I actually have found that I can sneak in 5 minutes where I just sit in my car 5 minutes longer and do a quick meditation. But I think part of that too is building good relationships with family and friends, and making sure that you're kind of taking the time to recover. But I think it's all in balance, right? Like I'm also someone who loves speed and loves kind of ambition and growth, and probably wouldn't be where we are today without that. And so it's the yin and the yang. It's making sure that you have kind of both the slow moments and the fast moments in your life.
Yeah, and again, I guess it boils down to the individual and what really energizes you and what really relaxes you. And that those are like useful, interesting things, how to sneak in little bits of time for the self and into your busy day, which I think would be much appreciated for everyone who's listening out there. Yeah, I think we're about ready to close. And I think my last question for you was, what have you been reading or watching lately that you would like to share? Something that's been interesting or eye-opening, like, let's say, like a closing thought.
I think for us as a brand, one of the things we've been digging into more and more is there are the beginnings of research coming out of the impacts on nutrient density with regenerative agriculture, and that's been something we've been just really excited about. I think that's probably been the biggest thing that we've been paying attention to lately. But all in all, I mean, I think just reinforcing the responsibility I think that all of us have in this space, and it may seem unobvious at first. I think that as you've heard me talk today, that us getting involved in this space, us working so closely with our suppliers to help kind of support changes in their world, it seems very logical, right? It seems like it was probably easy to do and an easy decision to come by. But it's not. When I first started looking at this space and thinking about the impacts that our agriculture system has on our planet, I didn't know how we at Simple Mills could influence it. And in fact, I was thinking about how do I personally make an impact outside of Simple Mills? It took me a couple months to realize, my goodness, you own a food company. Maybe you guys could do something here. And so I say that just to encourage and inspire others that that it may not seem obvious when it's forward looking of how you could personally be making an impact on this space, but it's very much possible, and better is better.
Wow, so beautiful. Thank you. That was excellent. Thank you, Katlin. That was wonderful. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. Thank you for being here, and congratulations in advance as you're about to be a mother. And thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, and congratulations on the new role.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being my first. So that we're done today. So thank you for joining us for Regenerative Rising's podcast, Elevating Stories, Activating Change. I am your host, Nisha Mary Poulose, Executive Director of Regenerative Rising, and with me today was Katlin Smith, founder and CEO of Simple Mills.